when I do a talk, two things are mandatory. One is a selfie, and secondly, heckling. So this is an open invitation to heckle. So on that note, when I do a selfie, I'm going to ask you to have your hands in the air like this, even if you're not having fun, even if you can't smile. Okay, so let's see if I can fit you all in. I can't? You ready? Okay, it's not quite a selfie yet. Almost, almost, almost. Hands in the air. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So, as Rick mentioned, I'm here to talk to you about how testing solves quality. Not. My talk is aptly titled Quality Does Not Equal Testing, and there's no actual causative correlation between the two, even though if you work at a large enterprise, you are bound to hear that we have to do more testing because we have bugs. But that logic doesn't actually prove itself. So let's begin. I am Theresa. I work at REA Group. As Rick said, I'm a lead QA or a practice lead for QA, which is not quality assurance, but quality analysis. I also co-founded and run DevOps Girls, which is my personal inclination is towards the lower end of the OSI stack. So I'm not very much, I'm sorry to say this to a web meetup, I'm not very huge fan of the upper layers, but I really do like infrastructure, networking, data, etc. So when we founded REA Group that we couldn't hire any women into system engineering roles, we started looking into why this is, and the result was DevOps Girls, which has grown since from REA to other companies. And so the four current co-organizers work all over the place, with one still left at REA. I have been in IT for 20 years, and I started doing computer science, and then I tried to be a developer and hated it, and went to help desk instead, and enjoyed troubleshooting problems and discovering bugs that people were experiencing. And so this led me to QA, which was the next step. Been a QA lead for about 8 years. You can find me at Theresa Neate on Twitter or DevOps Girls on Twitter. TheresaNeate.com is where I rant. Also, I will say that all these slides and the accompanying blog posts have already been published on my website, ready for you for today. So don't feel like you're going to miss out. It's all already there. Tonight, let's begin. We are walking from testing to quality to building in quality. Testing is a very reactive approach to quality, so let's look if there's any proactive steps you can take. Famous last words that I, as a QA lead, hear all the time. Here it is. Can I ask who's ever heard this before? Did it solve the problem? You found more bugs, right? Did that solve the problem? No. All right, we're going to disprove this claim. Spurious correlations are very often made. So when you have testing and quality as a causative correlation made, here's one to whet your appetite for today's conversation. Okay, so just because things seem to go along doesn't mean that they actually occur causatively. Would anyone like to venture a definition of testing? Now, I did say heckling is required, or even permitted. You can give me a serious answer if you like. What is testing? Right? Testing of developers.
It's whacking things until they break.
I've heard that one before. Yeah. Especially exploratory testing is whacking stuff. Right? Anyone else? Okay. Yes? Yeah. Yeah. So all of these fall into one bucket called feedback and inspection. You're inspecting, which is a skill, it's an art, and then providing feedback based on your findings, which too is an art. Whacking things is inspecting. Finding bugs is inspecting. Testing developers is inspecting. And then providing feedback. Not assurance. I'll make this very clear again. My role is called quality analyst, not quality assurance. You cannot assure quality. And I know, unfortunately, there's an American term that has become quite popular. Anyone work for an American company? Yep. I first got called a QA when I was working for ThoughtWorks, an American company. Thank goodness they called me a quality analyst. So the Americans like to say quality assurance testers, which is an oxymoron. You can't do any of that. It is a discipline. And by the way, I suspect I'll probably finish way before my half hour is up, so we'll have lots of time for questions if you have any at the end, but chuck them through the middle of the conversation as well. Testing is discipline. So whacking stuff, Craig, I'm going to pick on you. Whacking stuff isn't actually disciplined. Funny that. Some people say, oh, I just let my cat walk on the keyboard. That's how I figure out if something's working or not. That's not typically how we test things. There is a discipline required, and if you want to test, you need to know how. It's not just verifying a binary outcome, yes or no. There are very many different questions you can be asking. This is one big paradigm I like to reference a lot, which is the testing pyramid, which talks about, as most of you will know, can I ask in this room, who are developers or code? Awesome. Any testing or QA folks? Yes. Fantastic. Any UXs? Fabulous. Any BAs, analysts? Amazing. Any managers? I'm a manager too. So this really applies to anyone who touches code. There's a significant amount of discipline required in applying the test pyramid. Please do not neglect the service layer, which is the integration layer. Please do not neglect it. And the more you apply the test pyramid, the more meaningful your testing is afterwards, your actual proper testing. We call this automated testing, but in honesty, it's just checking. But now the ship sailed, we'll call it testing. Testing is something far more disciplined, far more intricate, far more creative. But for now, let's call automated testing testing. And I would advise, if you haven't yet, please get your head around unit integration and UI tests, and minimize your UI tests too. Who over indexes on UI tests and know that they do that? Anyone here who writes like 100 UI tests? Right. Absolutely. And how brittle were they?
Very.
Yeah. Absolutely. So with your React insight, you probably have very long tails to tell about this. So if you look at this diagram that Martin Fowler produced, the test pyramid has the slowest tests at the top and the fastest tests at the bottom. At the same time, the really fast tests cost very little. In other words, they run extremely quickly and they're easy to fix and easy to detect. UI tests are very, very expensive. They're very brittle. They're hard to maintain. So there's a correlation there between also the amount or the percentages. I roughly say my personal guide is about 70% of your tests should be unit. Maybe possibly, please don't quote me because this is not a hard and fast rule, but this is contextual. Maybe 20%, 25%. Should be integration tests, and maybe 5%, if that, on UI tests. So there is a discipline associated with testing, and because it is reactive, it's not good enough. There's more to this conversation. So then when we look at manual testing, which typically, unfortunately, people think means manual regression testing. Has anyone ever done manual regression testing? Want to stab yourself each time you do that? Yeah, exactly like that, like you just did. So the problem with manual regression testing is it's repetitive and it's mind-numbing, and because it's repetitive, you should get a machine to do it. So hopefully you have no manual regression testing at your workplace, or you fight very hard against it. The manual tests that you do have to count. Also, I'll say in the same breath, does anyone do manual cross-browser testing? The web meetup, I know you do. Yeah, it's awful. It's soul-destroying. Really is soul-destroying. And it is. But here's the thing. Then you add mobile to the conversation, and then you're absolutely screwed. Yeah. So then you have multiple operating system versions, devices, you bugger. So here's the thing. When you do something over and over and over and over, you start missing things. You remember that beautiful gorilla story where they demonstrated inattentional blindness, where they were throwing the ball at each other, and at the beginning of the video it says, watch the ball. So you're watching the ball, and there's a gorilla that moves in and out of the conversation. And at the end of the video they say, did you spot the gorilla? No one spots the gorilla, because as a human, you cannot see what you're not looking for. And the more you have to check a browser or a web page on a browser over and over and over, the more you'll look for confirmation. And now you have confirmation biases that blunt your vision. So please don't repeat your manual tests. Do them once off or automate them. If you have testing personnel, which not everyone does, then involve them in a way where they get to exercise their intelligence, not in a way that asks them to do something a machine could be doing. So don't make robots out of your human testers. Use them intelligently, and please use them at the beginning of the life cycle, not at the end when they have to assure quality. If you don't know this already, I'm going to repeat the obvious. Testing should be continuous. This is a beautiful diagram created by my friend and colleague in the UK, Dan Ashby. He talks about dev and ops and how we test all the time at all points throughout the life cycle of dev and ops. But I will make a distinction here that we are testing different types of tests. So logically, you can't test unit tests at every point. Right? So if you're monitoring software in production, you are not unit testing it. There's another form of testing occurring.
Where's design in that life cycle?
Beg your pardon?
Where's design in that life cycle?
I suppose we can squeeze it into plan.
No. Was the politest thing I could think of.
Thank you. I'll let Dan know. Yeah. But there's testing and design too, actually. You make a good point. There's massive testing and design. There's user research. There's all sorts of testing occurring in design. So let's just say we test all the time. But your testing types will always change and differ. Now, I've talked to you about testing. Let's talk about quality. Quality is value to some person. So I'm going to take that back and ask you for your ideas. Before I told you what it meant, how would you define quality?
That's what we wanted.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else?
NPS score is 8, 9 or 10.
No, only 9 or 10.
9 or 10, sorry.
So yeah, we're going to have an NPS conversation really shortly. The most frequent answer I get to that question is lack of bugs. Quality is value, and value is contextual. And people hate that this definition is not clear and set, and that you can measure it and you can implement it scientifically. But quality is going to matter differently to different people. So let's say you have a vision impaired user. They're really, really going to care about high contrast. They are going to care about high contrast. It's an accessibility requirement. I have an accessibility guru in front of me, so I reminded myself to include accessibility in the conversation.
Thank you.
So, if you are, for instance, a gamer, we have a gaming guru right here. Calling you gurus all of a sudden. We have someone who knows gaming really, really well. What gaming considers quality is very different. You probably want really, really high network bandwidth and throughput, and the ability to load images really quickly, and audio is clear. It's not necessarily true for mom and pop who's watching a home movie. So quality really is determined by the context, and it's really set by the context. Okay, how do we measure quality? Again, I'm going to ask your answers for this.
Got to be number of votes.
Requirements which we respond to.
Say that again.
Set of requirements which we respond to depending on the group which is going
Okay.
to use the product.
Yeah.
I used to use mean time between escalation to the boss.
Yeah, right. So
Great count.
speaking of mean time, we're going to touch a little bit on Dora metrics soon, but more on lead time than mean time. Anyone else?
Based on the picture, I'm going kitchen utensils.
That's totally the answer. Okay, I'll put you out of your misery. Testing is how you measure quality. It's one way. It's just feedback. So does it meet requirements? You can look at it, you can compare. Yes, that's testing. Static analysis. Anyone do any static analysis through their code? I'm assuming some of you do linting. Yeah, fantastic. That's feedback. That's how you measure quality. Testability analysis. That's really where your testing personnel are extremely valuable, because they can come in and tell you whether something can be tested. So that's something a human does with intelligence. BDD or TDD, it's a sometimes controversial subject. I don't think it is at all. You can do it at your discretion. It's not something that's dictated. It does help with providing feedback by implementing tests really quickly and early on. Continuous integration helps you measure quality, and monitoring and alerting, which is my personal favorite, only because I find that there's so much wealth that we can learn from how an application behaves in production. If we do that, we know how bad our application is, we then improve quality. Improving quality means that you go to postmortems, bug triages, you figure out what went wrong, you work out a strategy or an action plan based on that. But there's one thing you need to understand, and I'm going to read this quote word for word. You can't fix people, but you can fix systems and processes to better support people, making the right choices when designing and maintaining complex systems. Unfortunately, very often we find that human error is attributed to the cause of issues. If you have a look at the SRE handbook and the work of John Allspaw, you will see that we are talking about systems that support humans fail before the human fails. So have a look at which system didn't support the person. Don't stop at blaming the human. It's very retributive. I'd rather you don't. Doesn't actually fix the problem because we hammer them and we make them train and stuff like that, but we didn't fix what actually caused them not to have the understanding or the lack of sleep or whatever it is that failed them. So now, I'm going to talk to you about building in quality because testing is reactive. You can build in quality. Believe it or not. It's a far more fun way of looking at quality. than repeatedly testing something and figuring out what's wrong with it. Work slicing directly contributes to the quality of your software. If you do massive horizontal slices of the UI and then the service layer and then the infrastructure or the database at the bottom, and you implement them separately, and then you integrate them with each other, you're going to be hit with billions of bugs. Any good QA knows that integration is your hotspot for bugs. So why don't you rather vertically slice them from the start, implement your infrastructure, your database, whatever it is you need at the bottom. You create your integration points or your ESBs if you're still doing those. I know you're not, but you have your integration points in the middle and you have your UI and you thinly slice it. Maybe just a login field, maybe just a username, maybe just a password field, but it actually speaks to the entire stack. Now you've tested your integration. Each time you create something new, you use that same slice and you test the integration again. So you are literally getting continuous feedback on your integration points. And by the end, when you add your last little slice, you've built in quality. You don't have a 3-month testing phase at the end. I am on my soapbox tonight, so let's say something else. Anyone do system integration testing? System testing? Yeah. Those are awful practices because they make you test something in isolation and then you integrate something at the end. There are a lot of bugs coming from that. Reducing waste as you go means that, and bugs is a waste, means that your waste doesn't compound into creating other quality issues later on. So reduce the bugs and the waste as you find them. Don't deprioritize them. Don't write a test summary report and have a big argument about the bugs and then we're going to de-scope them and then we don't care about them anymore and then they bite you in the ass later on. So reduce the waste as you go. Flow. This is where I was going to talk about the DORA metrics. And I don't even know if you, Craig, if you're talking about the DORA metrics today. I was expecting that. DORA metrics, if you don't know what DORA is, it's DevOps Research something Association. I forget what the A stands for. Talks about the 4 metrics that will indicate to you whether you are high performing or not as a team or software delivery function. And one of them is lead time. So from the minute you start working, the idea comes into the pipeline to it ends up in production. That's lead time. The quicker that is, the less misinterpretation there is and the less bugs you have. So work on flow. You're actually building in quality that way. And you'll notice that everything I'm talking about here is processes and practices. Not frameworks, not magic bullets. I mentioned Sidney Dekker earlier on and John Allspaw. Dr. Sidney Dekker, massive hero of mine, please watch his video called Just Culture, which talks about justice. A culture that is just. Culture where we support mistakes and we encourage accountability. And we don't act on the person, but we fix the system. If you make it okay for people to reveal that they've made a mistake, you'll find them earlier. It won't be revealed later when someone tests your application and finds something that will, crash your system potentially. I'm going to go through this really quickly. Collaboration and visibility. All of these improve quality up front. Pair programming, I know contentious, just like TDD and BDD, but if you do it wisely and contextually, it can help you. That feedback helps you, your practices, but also it gives you another pair of eyes right next to you that tests alongside of you. Pull requests, if you are hopefully merging to trunk, not branches, because I have a huge problem with the current branch model that seems to have pervaded all of Melbourne. That's another conversation. I should come back and talk about that. Star-driven development, so TDD, BDD, test coverage. The funny thing about test coverage is you can fake it. We all know this. But the beautiful thing about test coverage, it tells you what's not tested. It doesn't tell you how well you're testing. It could tell you what's not tested. I had a GM at a place where Rick and I worked together once upon a time who had just discovered Agile. And, okay, test coverage. I want 100% test coverage. You know what the result was? We just ran tests without asserts in them. 100% coverage. He was happy.
I wasn't on the same team.
That's before we hired Rick. He came and fixed it. No. Kickoffs. Does anyone do kickoffs for software? For their stories, their features? Very valuable. Extremely valuable. There are multiple touch points of a team, rituals, but I will say kickoffs is number one for quality. Where you consider testability, you consider edge cases, you consider whether everyone's on the same page, and there is very little room for misinterpretation. Systems thinking, massive, it's my heart's desire, systems thinking. When you are systems thinking, you are thinking about the adjacent components, you're not just thinking about the component you're working on. Always think about the entire system and the consequences of actions you take. So, moral of the story, there's both a proactive and a reactive approach to quality. Can't test inequality. I know I state the obvious. I know that you actually knew this all along. I'm just giving you more ammunition to go have this argument or this fight with whoever's making you test more to rectify quality. My absolute hero in the lean world, Deming, said this: perfection is too late. The quality, good or bad, is already in the product. Okay. You'll find these slides and the blog that I wrote on my website. And with that, thank you for your time.